Hey everybody, my name is Jason Blake, and I'm the designer and publisher of Cysmic. Cysmic is a highly thematic sci-fi board game set in the distant future, where humanity has traveled to another planet to build a new civilization. But something has gone terribly wrong. The planet we terraformed is beginning to fracture apart. Players take on the role of a faction leader tasked with saving their people and themselves by racing to build a massive colony ship before the planet collapses. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to play competitive mode, which is the core experience of Cysmic. Let's jump in. All right, first things first. How do you win Cysmic? There are no victory points, no in-game scoring. The first player to launch their completed colony ship is the winner. To do that, you need to do three things. You need to build all 6 modules of your colony ship. You need to evacuate all of your units off the planet. And then you need to launch at the end of your turn. Now, if you still have units left behind or captured, you can still try to launch, but you'll have to roll the humanity die to see if your faction is willing to leave them behind. And that decision carries consequences. So your goal is simple. Build your ship, get your people out, and launch before anybody else. And before the planet collapses. And just know this up front. This is not a passive game. You're going to be fighting, you're going to be capturing units, and taking what you need while racing against your opponents and the planet itself. Before we jump into setup and gameplay, let's do a quick tour of what you're actually looking at. You're the leader of a faction, and everything you control revolves around a few key pieces. First, your units. You've got soldiers and power mechs for combat. Then you have miners and harvesters for gathering resources. And then you have speakers, which help you gain influence across the planet. And then there's your colony ship. This is your mobile base and ultimately your way off the planet. Next, your command cards and your command board. This is how you take actions in the game. Every turn, you'll be playing command cards to control your units, trigger abilities, and unlock bonus actions. Think of this as your control panel for everything you do. Now, let's talk about habitats and influence. Habitats are scattered across the planet, and when you control them, you gain influence. Influence increases how many units you can recruit and how much lorium you can store. So, controlling people directly powers your engine. Speaking of that, let's look at resources. The big one is lorium, which you mine from the planet and you spend to build your ship and upgrade your troops. You also gain discovery cards and relics, which give you powerful effects. And then you also, of course, have captured units, which is what you trade back to your opponents to get the blueprints you need. Which brings us to the colony ship blueprints. When your ship starts, it starts incomplete, and to finish it, you need the blueprints from other players. This is going to be what your ship looks like at the very beginning of the game. And then you're going to build your 6 modules and move closer to launching. And now the board itself, this is the planet made up of spaces that will collapse over time. And this is tracked by the Cysmograph. The Cysmograph drives tremors, fractures, and eventually destroys parts of the map. So the longer the game goes, the more dangerous everything becomes. Finally, we have your construction board. The construction board is your dashboard. It tracks your influence, it tracks your stored lorium, your captured units, your relics, and your ship's progress. Everything about your whole faction state lives right here. And that's the big picture. You're managing units, gathering resources, controlling territory, building your ship, all while the planet is actively falling apart around you. All right, let's get the game set up. Start by placing the main board in the center of the table like this. Then take the 6 outer edge pieces and connect them around the board, matching the artwork as shown. Next, place the colony city hex right in the center space. Orientation doesn't matter. Now we're going to build out the planet. Take all of the terrain hexes and we're going to separate them into 6 groups of 21 hexes each, separated out by their terrain type. Shuffle each group face down And then, starting with one terrain type, place 6 hexes face up along the matching edge. Then, place 5 hexes along those same hexes, and then 4, and then 3, 2, and 1 as shown. Repeat that same process for all 6 terrain types until the entire board is filled. Once the terrain is down, place the mountains. Each terrain type has 3 mountains that match its color. Place them on the mountain spaces in that terrain. Do that for all 6 terrains. Now that the mountains are placed, let's go ahead and place the habitats. Each terrain gets 3 camps, 2 outposts, and 1 settlement. These are what they look like. Camps are the smallest one with 1 pipe on the side. Outposts are a little taller with two pipes on the outside. And the settlement has 3 pipes on one side and is a little bit taller. We're going to place all 3 camps on the 1 space on the spots that are labeled camp. We're going to place the 2 outposts on the 2 spaces, and then we're going to place the settlement on the 3 space. Do that for all 6 terrain types. Finally, place the tallest habitat at Colony City. It has 5 pipes on the side. Next, we're going to set up the Cysmograph. Place it off to the side of the board within reach of all players, and we're going to set it up for a 3-player game. So we're going to place 1 token on the 6, 1 trimmer token on the 5, 1 on the 4, and then all of the other tokens are going to be stacked in the space equal to the number of players in the game. So this is what your board should look like for a 3-player game. We're going to place this next to the board. Next, let's set up the decks and the expansions. Let's shuffle all discovery cards together into one deck. For this setup, I recommend playing with the planetary event cards, the molten core cards, and all the standard discovery cards mixed together. That's my recommended way to play for the full experience. We're going to shuffle all these cards, place them next to the board. We're going to take all the cards in the relic deck, shuffle these, and place these also next to the board within reach of all players. Now we're going to take the Espionage deck, and the Espionage deck also needs to be shuffled, and we're going to place these next to the board within reach of all players. If this is your first game, you can simplify things by removing the Molten Core relic cards and discovery cards. You can also remove the Espionage expansion. And you can remove the planetary event cards, as described in the rulebook under Setup, but this video is for the full intended experience. Finally, place all Lorium, combat markers, and relic tokens and dice within reach of all players. Last but not least, you're going to take all of your fracture tokens and you're going to place those inside the fracture bag. You're going to shuffle those tokens and we're going to place that somewhere near the Cysmograph within reach of all players. Now, the game is set up and ready to go. All right, now let's get each player set up. Each player gets 1 tray, which includes almost everything they need for competitive mode. Units, tokens, command cards, and faction materials all in one place. The only thing not in the tray is the colony ship launcher, which comes from the main miniatures tray. Go ahead and grab one of those for your color now. Now, in front of each player, place your command board and your construction board like this. Since we're using the Espionage expansion, make sure you're using the Espionage side of the command board. You'll notice the Espionage symbol is right here, and you can also tell by the Espionage areas that you can slot your card into on the side. The other side will not include those options, and this shows that it's compatible with the Euro mode and the standard mode. Today we're using the Espionage card expansion, so this is the side we're going to be using. You can place your player aid somewhere over to the side for now and use it as needed. Next, each player should take their 11 command cards, and we're going to remove one of these and place it back in the box. Every player has 2 negotiate command cards. One of these is compatible with the Espionage Expansion, and one is for the standard base game. In this particular case, as we mentioned over here, we're using the Espionage Expansion, and this is our espionage symbol right there. You'll notice it's not on this one. We're going to place this card for the base game back in the box. This is going to remain with our other 9 command cards. Every player's command cards are all the same. Now, take your blueprint tokens, and we're going to place these on your construction board with the missing side face up. That's going to be the side that you see with the X's. Let's place those in the proper locations as shown. You can match the name of the blueprint with the name on your construction board. Now we're going to flip your own player color of your blueprint to the acquired side. We're playing the yellow color, so we're going to flip the yellow blueprint token. In this particular case, we're also going to be playing a game with orange and with blue. That means the other player colors not in play will be flipped over to the acquired side. All players are going to know how to obtain gray, green, and purple in this particular game. Next, we're going to take the influence cube and we're going to place that on the starting influence spot right here on the influence track. Now, each player is going to select one of 3 faction cards that they're going to get at random. There are 27 faction cards in the game to choose from. Let's go over some of the anatomy of a card. In this particular case, the spot up here shows you what the minimum number of players recommended to play it with is. We're going to see what our setup is here for our resources and our influence. We're going to see how many of each type of troop that we're going to start with. This is the name of our faction and our background. And then on the back, these are going to be the 4 or 5 or possibly even more different numbers of special abilities that that faction has, asymmetric to all the others. So in this particular case, we cannot use this particular faction because it is a 4+ player. So we're going to remove all 4+ player factions, and we're only going to start with 3 and below. In this particular case, I've received these 3 factions. All 3 of these are valid factions. This is a 3+, a 2+, and a 3+. The difficulty rating is down here at the bottom. This is a 3 out of 5 difficulty, a 1 out of 5, and a 1 out of 5. In this particular case, I'm going to start with the Hank's Imperative. Now we're going to follow the setup on the faction card. This will tell you your starting influence, resources, and units. We're going to start with 3 influence. Over here, we're going to move this influence cube up to 3. We're going to start with 2 discovery cards. I drew 2 discovery cards at random. I'm going to place these in my play area. I get to start with 1 Laurium crystal. That is going to go right here on my Laurium crystal storage track. And then I also start with 1 relic card. Your relic cards at the beginning of the game, you get to flip over and you can slot them in to one of your relic active slots over here on the side. Discovery cards you can place out of the way, and you will need space above your command board for the gameplay. This is where your command cards are going to go in these different slots throughout the game. So make sure you have room right here. Now we're going to be placing our units and our starting locations on the planet board. Place your colony ship launcher in one of the inner 6 spaces of any terrain type. You just cannot choose a space that is touching another terrain. So in this case, I'm going to start right here on this one. Typically, players choose the terrain closest to where they're sitting, but any unclaimed terrain works. Then you're going to place your starting units in spaces adjacent to your colony ship. You can place up to 3 units per space as shown. If your faction starts with a control of a habitat, you're going to place one of your flags on that habitat, and based on how many pipes on the side or where that habitat is on the board, what's the number underneath, that is the influence that you're going to start extra above your actual setup influence on your faction. For example, if I was going to start with this outpost, I would add 2 more influence to my starting influence on my construction board. But in this particular case, my faction does not start with a habitat. Also, something to keep in mind, if you do start with control of a habitat, that habitat space is also a deploy location. So you could place up to 3 units in that same location as well. But again, in this particular case, I am not starting with a habitat. Finally, give the first player token to whoever best matches their faction, either by personality, profession, whatever feels right. Or you can choose randomly, and that's player setup. At this point, every player has their faction, their units on the board, their command cards in hand, and they're ready to take their first turn. All right, let's talk about how a basic turn works. At the start of the game, every player has the same 10 command cards in hand. These cards are how you do everything in Cysmic. Each round, all players will be playing into the same command column, starting with column 1, like we see here. Then, next round, you'll move to column 2, then 3, all the way down to column 5. On your turn, you're going to do 3 main things. First, burn a command card. Take 1 card from your hand and place it face down in the current column like this. Second, play a command card. You're going to take another card from your hand and place it face up on top of the burned card. This is the card you're actually going to use this turn. You'll perform the actions on that card from top to bottom, as shown here. And then third, you're going to perform 1 bonus action in that column that matches one of the icons on the bottom of your played command card. That's a turn. Burn a card, play a card, take a bonus action. That's the core turn framework. Now, once all players have taken a turn, that's the end of the round, and everyone moves on to the next column. After 5 rounds, all 5 columns are filled, and that completes a cycle. At that point, all players will reset. You take all of your command cards back into your hand, and you start again from column 1. So the flow looks like this. Each turn, you're committing 2 cards. Each round, everyone advances together, and every 5 rounds, everything resets. That's the core loop of the game. We're going to come back later and walk through a full turn in detail at the end of this video, once you've seen how everything else works. All right, we need to understand the planet board, because this is the battlefield for the entire game. Even though the board is physically flat on the table, Cysmic treats it like a spherical planet. There is no true edge to the world. The outer edge pieces are just reference pieces. They show where each terrain wedge is, and they show the global movement arrows, but they are never actually spaces. Units can't occupy them, and they're not affected by collapses. Now, during setup, the planet is built in 2 layers, like we see here. The bottom layer is the printed board itself. The top layer is the 127 hex tiles placed on top of it. Both of those count as spaces in the game. So whether a unit is standing on a top hex tile or on the revealed bottom layer underneath, it is still considered to be in a space. Movement also ignores whether a space is on the top layer or the bottom layer. A space is a space. At the center is Colony City, and around that are 6 rings of hexes. That ring structure matters later when fractures happen, because fractures use those distances from the center to determine which spaces collapse. Now let's talk about the top layer first. Every top layer hex has 2 things, a terrain type and a feature. The terrain type is one of the 6 landscape types: desert, forest, rocky, savanna, tundra, or wetlands. The feature is what that space actually does. As shown here, features include camp, outpost, settlement, explorable, lorium, tunnel, lake, and mountain. Colony City is the one exception. It does not have a terrain type. Its feature is simply Colony City. So in practical terms, the terrain tells you what region of the planet that hex belongs to, while the feature tells you how that specific space behaves. For example, camp, outpost, settlement, and Colony City are the spaces where habitat miniatures go. Explorable and lorium spaces are used for resource gathering. Tunnel spaces connect into the tunnel movement system. And lake and mountain spaces are impassable. That means units cannot enter them or occupy them. Now let's talk about the bottom layer. When a top hex collapses and is removed, it reveals the printed space underneath. Those bottom layer spaces are either devastated or abyss. Abyss spaces are impassable, just like lakes and mountains, but devastated spaces can be entered and moved through, but they do not produce lorium and they do not give discovery cards. Also, when a devastated space is first revealed, you place a relic token on it like this. So that creates an important shift in the board over time. Early in the game, the top layer is full of productive spaces, but later on, those spaces may become empty, devastated ground or completely impassable abyss. Now, let's cover space capacity, because this is one of the most important board rules in the game. A normal space can hold up to 3 troops in any combination of soldiers, miners, and speakers. Or it can hold up to 2 troops and 1 vehicle, meaning either a power mech or a harvester. Those units must all belong to a single faction unless combat is happening in that space. If combat has been initiated, then 2 opposing factions can share the same space, and each faction must obey its own space capacity. So during combat, each side can have up to 3 units in that space with no more than 1 vehicle per faction. That means a combat space can hold as many as 6 total units, 3 from each side, as long as both players still follow capacity correctly. And this is not optional. Space capacity must be observed at all times. The miniatures were even designed to physically reinforce this. 3 troops fit in half a hex, and a vehicle takes up the footprint of 1 edge of the hex, with 2 troops fitting around it. So when both sides are maxed out in combat, the full 6-unit battle still fits entirely within that 1 space. There are a few special restrictions to keep in mind. Lake, mountain, and abyss spaces, as I mentioned, are always impassable, so they can never contain units. And a space can also contain units and things like a habitat, depending on what type of space it is. And then there is the colony ship, which follows its own rules entirely. A colony ship takes up a full space by itself. It cannot share that space with any other unit, miniature, or token. If it enters a space that contains anything else, all of that is destroyed. So when you see a colony ship on the board, that space belongs to it and it alone. So the big picture here is this. The planet is made up of spaces on 2 layers. Top layer spaces define the world as we begin the game. Bottom layer spaces are revealed as the planet collapses. And then some spaces help you gather, some help you control territory, some help you move, and some cannot be entered at all. And every move you make has to respect space capacity. Now that you understand the planet, let's talk about what's happening to it. This is the Cysmograph, and it tracks the stability of the planet over time. Throughout the game, certain actions will cause tremors. When a tremor happens, you take the stack of tremor tokens and you move it forward 1 space on the track, like this. At first, nothing happens, but eventually that stack reaches the fracture space, and when it does, everything stops immediately. You draw a fracture token from the bag and you resolve it right away. That token will tell you exactly which spaces collapse based on their distance from the colony city. It will show you the terrain type and the ring of hexes that collapse. Let's look at an example. Let's say the token shows a collapse on Forest Ring 3, like this. That means these 3 spaces collapse at the same time. When a space collapses, you remove the top hex tile. If that reveals a devastated space, you'll also place a relic token there, like this. We'll talk more about relics later. If it reveals an abyss, that space is now completely impassable, and if units are on a space when it collapses, they're destroyed, unless, and here's where things get really important, some units have an ability called Early Warning. When a fracture is about to happen, any unit with Early Warning can move off of a collapsing space before it's removed, like this. They also take their friends with them, and why wouldn't they, right? This gives you a chance to reposition and save those units, but only if you have that ability in the right place at the right time. Oh yeah, and if your units are locked in combat, Early Warning doesn't work. Now, after the fracture is resolved, the Cysmograph resets, but not back to where it was, just worse. You take the top tremor token off the stack and you place it on the leftmost empty space. Then you move the remaining stack to the next leftmost empty space, like this. Over time, those tokens spread out across the entire track, and eventually, you'll reach a point where every space is filled. At that point, every tremor causes an immediate fracture. No buildup, no warning, every single tremor instantly collapses part of the planet. So early in the game, tremors are manageable. Mid-game, fractures start happening a little more often, and late game, the planet is collapsing constantly. So this system isn't just a timer, it's pressure. It forces you to act before the board disappears beneath you. Now let's zoom in on one of the most important parts of the board, habitats and influence. Habitats represent the population of the planet. You'll see them spread across the board as camps, outposts, settlements, and colony city, like shown here. Each player has 7 control flags. You'll use these to claim habitats across the board. You control a habitat by placing one of your control flags on it. And once you control it, that habitat contributes to your influence. Each habitat has a value. Camps are worth 1, outposts are worth 2, settlements are worth 3, and the colony city is worth 5. Your total influence is tracked on your construction board. And this number directly controls 2 very important things. First, it determines how many units you can recruit. And secondly, it determines how much lorium you can store. We'll cover both of those concepts later. Now, if you ever lose track of your influence, it's very easy to recalculate. Just add up the total value of the habitats you control and combine that with your starting influence. That will always give you your correct total in case you lose track. Only one player can control a habitat at a time. If another player takes control of it, they replace your control flag with theirs, like this. So habitats are constantly contested. They're not just locations, they directly power your economy and your ability to grow. So at a high level, habitats give you influence, influence controls your capacity, and controlling the population powers your entire faction. Now let's talk about your units, because these are the pieces you'll actually be commanding for the rest of the game. Every miniature in your player color on the planet board is one of your units, except for your control flags. Your units fall into 3 categories. First, you have troops, which are soldiers, miners, and speakers. Secondly, you have vehicles, which are power mechs and harvesters. And third, you have your colony ship, which is its own special type of unit called a mobile base. Each of these roles matters. Soldiers and power mechs are your combat units. They start fights and capture enemy units. Miners and harvesters are your resource units. They help you gather lorium and discovery cards. Speakers are your influence units. They help you take control of habitats and also change the roles of other troops. And your colony ship is your mobile base of operations and ultimately your win condition. Now the colony ship is important enough that it needs its own clarification. It is treated as a unit for movement, but it is not a troop and it is not a vehicle. It cannot be destroyed. It also occupies a space by itself and cannot share that space with other units or tokens. And when it does occupy a space, that space loses its terrain features, including things like habitats, tunnels, and lorium. Your units can exist in 3 places during the game. They can be on the planet board, they can be captured by opponents, or they can be in your reserve, which is your off-board supply in your player area. Thematically, those are units waiting inside your colony ship or your controlled habitats until you call them in. Now let's look at the unit attributes and the information on the command cards. Every unit type has 4 core attributes shown at the top of its command card, and also summarized in the reference area of your command board. These 4 attributes are cost, movement, health, and combat. Every individual unit of that type uses those same values. Cost tells you what it takes to bring that unit into play. If it's a troop, that cost is paid in influence when you recruit. If it's a vehicle, that cost is going to be paid in lorium when you upgrade a troop into that vehicle. Movement is simply how many spaces that unit can move in a single move action. A unit can move any number up to that value, including 0. So activating a unit does not mean it must move its full amount. Health tells you how hard the unit is to defeat in combat. If there is a single number, the final result of a combat die result must meet or exceed that value. If there are 2 numbers, like say 6 plus 4, then 2 separate combat die results in the same strike must meet both values to defeat that unit. Combat tells you what battle dice that unit contributes in a fight. In Cysmic, there are military dice, which are red, and support dice, which are yellow. The icons on the card show both the type and quantity of dice that unit adds to your battle pool. Now, beyond attributes, every unit type also has an inherent ability. These are just as important as the numbers. There are 3 core abilities introduced here: Engage, Shield, and Early Warning. A unit can sometimes gain an additional ability from other game effects, but it cannot gain one it already has. Engage is the ability that allows a unit to enter a space containing enemy units and initiate a combat. This is extremely important because it is your only normal way to start combat. Soldiers and power mechs inherently have engage. So if you want to attack, these are the units that do it. Shield belongs to speakers. Speakers can reduce damage against themselves or friendly units in combat. We'll show exactly how that works once we get to the combat section, but for now, just understand that speakers are not only influence pieces, they can also support and protect your forces once a fight begins. Early warning belongs to miners, harvesters, and colony ships. This ability lets them escape from a collapsing space instead of being destroyed. But there's a very important catch. Early warning does not work if that unit is locked in combat. So if one of those units is tied up in a fight when a collapse happens, that protection is shut off. That brings us to one of the most important concepts in the game: locked versus unlocked units. A unit with engage, meaning a soldier or a power mech, can enter a space with enemy units and initiate a combat. The moment that happens, every unit in that space becomes locked. And if more units enter a space that already has a combat going, those units also become locked, whether they have engage or not. Locked units are heavily restricted. They cannot move, they cannot perform actions from their command cards, they cannot be chosen by effects that say activate an unlocked unit, and they cannot use early warning. A unit becomes unlocked again once there are no enemy units left in its space. So in practical terms, if a combat ends or the enemy leaves, the surviving units in that space go back to being unlocked. Also, colony ships are always unlocked. Now let's talk about activating units, because this is the core of how they function. Normally when you play a unit command card, you activate all unlocked units of that type on the planet board. Then you resolve that card's sections from top to bottom, one action at a time for each activated unit. Locked units are never activated by that card, but sometimes a game effect will tell you to activate a unit directly. When that happens, the process is basically the same as if you had played that unit's card, but only for one specific unit. You choose one unlocked unit that meets the requirement. You perform one action from each section of that unit's command card, top to bottom, using only that one unit. You can skip actions if you want, and if one of those actions has a trimmer icon, you still trigger the trimmer as normal. Again, locked units cannot be activated. A related concept is reactivating a command card. Some effects let you choose a command card that you already played earlier and resolve it again as if you had just played it. You choose an eligible face-up played command card above your board, then you perform one action from each section, top to bottom, on that card. You can still skip actions, and trimmers still happen if the action shows a trimmer icon. And if that card would activate units, locked units still cannot be activated. Now let's move into the three big ways that units change on the board: recruit and deploy, field promote, and upgrade. Recruit is the main way to bring new troops from your reserve onto the planet. When you recruit, first choose one or more troops from your reserve whose total influence cost is equal to or less than your current influence. Soldiers, miners, and speakers each have their own costs shown on their cards and on your command board. If your reserve has no troops left, then you simply cannot recruit. In this particular case, I'm going to say our influence is 10. Now, based on our cost of our units, we could recruit 3 miners at 3 influence each, and then 1 soldier. That all totals 10 influence. We could also do 5 speakers. All 5 speakers together, since they're worth 2 each, is 10 influence. We could also do 1 miner, 1 speaker, and 5 soldiers. Again, any combination of troops totaling up to your current influence cost are valid choices for recruitment. After choosing the troops, you must immediately deploy them. Your valid deploy locations are any space with a habitat you control and any space adjacent to your colony ship. There are several important deployment restrictions. You cannot deploy into impassable spaces like lakes, mountains, or abyss. You cannot deploy into a space containing a colony ship, and you cannot exceed space capacity. You may deploy a unit with engage into a deploy location containing unlocked enemy units, and that immediately initiates a combat with your unit being the attacker. You may also deploy a unit, whether it has engage or not, into one of your existing combats in a valid deploy location, and that deployed unit becomes locked. You may split your recruited troops among multiple deploy locations, and if you deploy into a space containing a relic token, your unit picks it up immediately. One little practical note from the rulebook that is worth saying out loud: it's smart to choose all the troops you want to recruit before placing any of them, just so you don't lose track of what you already deployed, because you might want to change your mind based on what units you've already started recruiting, and you might want to pull some back and choose differently. Now, Field Promote is different. Field Promote is essentially role swapping one deployed troop into another troop type. To do it, choose one unlocked troop on the planet, replace it with a different troop type from your reserve in that same space, and return the original troop to reserve. So a soldier can become a miner can become a speaker, and so on, as long as the replacement is a different troop type and you actually have that miniature available in your reserve. There are a few restrictions here too. You can only field promote one troop each time the action is performed. Each activated speaker can do this once, which is why speakers are so flexible. You ignore both influence and troop cost when doing it, and speakers can also field promote themselves. Normally, locked units cannot be field promoted unless a specific game effect says otherwise. So field promote is basically tactical retooling. It lets you change what a troop is doing without having to recruit a brand new one from scratch. Finally, upgrade lets you turn troops into vehicles. A soldier upgrades into a power mech, and miners upgrade into harvesters. Speakers do not upgrade. To upgrade, choose an unlocked soldier or miner on the planet, pay the required lorium cost for the corresponding vehicle, that's 1 for harvesters, 3 for power mechs, and then you replace the troop with that vehicle from your reserve, and return the original troop back to your reserve. Now here's the nuance. If that troop is already in one of your deploy locations, then you just pay the vehicle's normal lorium cost, be it 1 or 3. That's a standard upgrade. But if that troop is somewhere else on the map, you can still upgrade it by dropship for 1 additional lorium. That means you're basically delivering the vehicle out to that unit's location. And every time you do a dropship upgrade, you perform a trimmer for each vehicle placed this way. Upgrade also has some restrictions. You must have the replacement vehicle available in your reserve, and you must pay the full lorium cost, including dropship cost if needed, and the upgrade cannot exceed space capacity. Normally, locked units cannot be upgraded unless a specific effect says otherwise. The upgrade command card lets you immediately activate one of the upgraded vehicles as if you had played that unit's command card. And don't forget to cause a trimmer if that applies. So the big picture for units is this. Soldiers and power mechs are your attackers. Miners and harvesters are your economic engine. Speakers control the population and reshape your troop mix. And the colony ship is your mobile base and your escape route. Every unit has stats, an ability, and a specific job. Some will be unlocked and free to act. Some get locked in combat and lose that freedom. And through recruiting, deploying, field promoting, and upgrading, you're constantly reshaping your faction on the board to match what the game is throwing at you. That's the foundation you need before we move into movement and combat. Alright, let's talk about movement. Movement in Cysmic is always from one space to an adjacent space, like we see here. Each unit has a movement value, and that's the maximum number of spaces it can move during a move action. Now there are a few rules that always apply. You cannot move into impassable spaces, as I've mentioned many times before, and that includes lakes, mountains, and abyss spaces like shown here. You also cannot move through a space that contains enemy units. If you want to enter a space with enemy units, you must use a unit with Engage, and that immediately initiates a combat. You can move through spaces that are at maximum capacity, but you cannot end your movement there. You can also move through a friendly colony ship, but you cannot end your movement in that space. Speaking of the colony ship, I would like to add one extra clarification that helps here. The colony ship's move feature works the same way as Stabilize in terms of how the ship changes position. The difference is that Stabilize is mandatory and causes a trimmer, while Move is optional and does not cause a trimmer. However, what I failed to explain in the rulebook was that they both collapse the space they move from. This is not as clear as I would have liked, so I wanted to clarify that here. Now, let's look at the example shown here. We have a unit starting in this space, and it has a movement value of 3. From here, it can move one space at a time, choosing any valid adjacent path, like this, 1, 2, 3. But notice how the path matters. If there's a mountain or a lake, or that path is completely blocked. If there's an enemy unit, that path is also blocked unless you're engaging. So movement is not just about distance, it's about finding a valid route. Now let's talk about global movement, because this is where the board really opens up. As shown on the outer edge pieces, you'll see these colored arrows. When a unit exits the board through one of these arrows, it can enter any other arrow of the same color anywhere around the board, just like this. It does not even have to be directly across. You're not just wrapping to the opposite side, you're jumping to any matching arrow of that color. And that entire move counts as still just one space. This gives you a huge amount of flexibility for positioning and surprise movement across the planet. Next, we have tunnels, or tunnel spaces. If a unit enters a tunnel, it has the option to move to any other tunnel on the board as part of that same movement, like shown here. That also counts as just one movement step. But this is optional. A unit can move onto a tunnel space, walk across it, or even stop on it without using the tunnel ability at all. So think of tunnels as both a normal space and a fast travel option when you want to use it. Now let's bring it all together with this example. As shown here, this unit has multiple possible paths. It could move step by step across adjacent spaces, it could use global movement to jump across the board, or it could enter a tunnel and come out somewhere completely different. But every path must still follow the same rules. No impassable spaces, no ending in a full space, no moving through enemies unless you're engaging. So, movement in Cysmic is very flexible, but it's also constrained by the state of the board. Once you understand movement, you're ready for what happens when units collide. Alright, let's talk about combat. Combat in Cysmic happens between exactly two factions in a single space. All troops and vehicles in that space are involved, and colony ships are never involved in combat. All units in that combat space are also locked. The most important thing to understand is that combat happens in two distinct parts. First, you initiate a combat. Second, you resolve the combat. Those are not the same thing. So let's start with how to initiate a combat. A combat is initiated when a unit with engage, meaning a soldier or power mech, enters a non-combat space that contains enemy units. This usually happens through movement or recruit and deploy, but game effects can also cause it. The player who entered the space is the attacker. The other player is the defender. The attacker places a combat marker into one of their initiating units, like shown here, and that marker tells us that this is now a combat space, that all units there are locked, and that the side with the marker is the attacker, and that the combat will need to be resolved later when one of the players decides to resolve it. Other units from either side can still join that combat later, with or without engage, as long as space capacity is respected. Now here's the next big point. Combat does not resolve immediately when it starts. It resolves later, often several turns later, usually when a player plays their battle command card or from a bonus action or other effect that resolves a single combat. When combat is resolved, players alternate strikes until one side is defeated or one side flees. Now let's go through the steps to resolve a combat. Step 1 is select a combat to resolve. If you're resolving a combat because you played your battle command card, you must resolve all of your combats one at a time in any order. If you're resolving from a bonus action or another effect, then you typically are just resolving one combat. Step 2, you determine first strike. The player who triggered the combat resolution gets first strike. That might be from playing the battle command card or a bonus action or some other effect. Certain cards or abilities may also steal first strike, but the important thing is this. Attacker and defender do not determine first strike. Those are separate concepts. Step 3, Now you must decide to strike or flee. The player with first strike now chooses whether to strike or flee. Typically, a player is going to strike. However, if they cannot defeat the opponent and have a legal path out, they may choose to flee instead. Step 4, that's the end of combat. Combat ends when only one side remains in the space, either because units were defeated through strikes or because one side successfully flees. When that happens, return the combat marker to the supply and all remaining units become unlocked. If you're in the middle of a battle command card and still have other combats to resolve, then just go back to step 1 and choose the next combat. Now let's zoom in to step 3A, which is the strike. A strike is one player's attack. The player with first strike attacks first unless they choose to flee instead. A strike has its own sequence. The strike step 1 is collect your battle dice. If the striking player is the attacker, they also gain the blue attacker strike die. If the striking player is the defender, they gain the green defender strike die. Then they gather their red military dice and yellow support dice based on the combat attributes of all of their units currently in that combat. Then you strike step 2, which is roll dice. You roll all your battle dice, and if anything gives rerolls from abilities or cards, those rerolls should happen immediately at this point. Now, step 3, you apply the strike die result. Resolve the strike die, and the strike die can do one of 3 things. It can give you a reroll of one combat die of the shown color, it can give you a value modifier to a combat die, or it can trigger a tremor, which may even cause an immediate fracture if the seismograph reaches that point. On step 4, you can apply shields. Now, the non-striking player may reduce a combat die value by 1 for each unit they have with shield. Speakers inherently have shields, so each shield must be applied to a different die, and each die can only be affected by 1 shield. So shield is not a blanket reduction. It is one separate -1 per shield unit, spread across different dice. Now, step 5 is play discovery cards as combat die modifiers. This is a huge part of combat. The striking player may play 1 discovery card as a modifier on each combat die. Then the non-striking player may do the same. Players keep alternating back and forth, modifying any combat die, whether it was already modified or not. This continues until the non-striking player passes. Once the non-striking player passes, no more discovery cards can be played by either player. Also, modified die values can go above the printed values on the dice. This means discovery cards are a shared tug-of-war over the dice. One player can boost or alter results, then the other player can answer back, and this continues until that window closes. The example in the rulebook shows this very well. Let's also go through an example here. So in this scenario, we have a 5, a 3, a 4, a 4, and a 2 where we added the +1 for the strike die. In this particular case, we're now going to apply shields. The yellow player is defending in this case, and they have 1 speaker. They're going to reduce this die by 1. So now this is going to be a full miss. That is a 2. But we still have to worry about all of these dice over here. We have, in this particular case, 2 soldiers and 1 speaker versus a power mech and a miner. That's why all this dice is here. So at this point, the blue player is not going to play any cards. They're the attacker. They're happy with this even after losing this from the speaker, because at this point, they have 3 hits. These actually 4 hits, because this, and this could kill either of the 2 soldiers, and whichever one's left could also kill that speaker. So these are going to be easily defeating any of that. So the defending player, yellow in this case, is going to play a -3 on the 5. We're going to play a -2 on this 4, and then we're going to play a -2 on this 4, and a -1 on this 3. At this point in time, the yellow player has played a lot of different discovery cards in this particular case. They were very lucky, and they had minuses for all of the different dice and used their speaker for this dice. Now at this point, this is a 2, this is a 2, this is a 2, and this is also a 2. All of these dice, after all of that, are now misses. So that means currently none of those players, or none of those units are going to be defeated. Now it's blue's turn to play back. In this case, they're going to play a +2, and a +2, and a +1. Now the yellow player has one more card that they could play, and they're going to play it on this one. So after all is said and done, we started with a 4, -2 is a 2, +1 is 3, -1 is back to a 2. The blue player has no more cards to play. This die is now a miss. This die is now a miss. So this card also did not get modified. This die is also now a 2. However, this die has been changed into a 4 -2 +2. This is now back to a 4. This was a 5 -3, now a +2. These two are also 4s together. So these two can defeat these two units, which they will then defeat each one of these, and they will go into their prison. The remaining character here, the speaker, cannot defeat that power mech, but it is time for the speaker to try to defeat that miner. So in this case, both players have spent all of their discovery cards from their hand. These all get discarded. However, you can still go ahead and roll regardless of whether that happens or not. Yellow is in this case, the speaker is going to roll the green defender die and the yellow attack die. We're going to roll these, and what we ended up with is we have a reroll and a 2. We're going to resolve that strike die first. We have a 2. That is now a miss on either the power mech or the miner. And sadly, the yellow player has no more discovery cards. Nothing else can be modified. In this case, the other player will now respond one more time. They are going to use the 4 red dice from their power mech and 1 yellow die from their miner. And then, of course, the blue strike die, since they're the attacker. They're going to roll these again. And we have a trimmer. The trimmer is going to modify our seismograph. At right now, we don't have a fracture event, but if we did, we would stop at this point and resolve the fracture, which means the combat could be affected, but we're not going to resolve that right now. It's just a trimmer. So what do we have left? We've got a 3, a 3, a 4, a 2, and a 1. These two are misses. We are not going to worry with these. The yellow player, once again, can resolve their -1, which they would do now. That's going to make that die a 3. All of these dice would be able to be hits on that speaker. All you need is a 3 to defeat speakers. And again, as a reference, we will show that here. The health is 3. You need to match or exceed that value. And the blue player did even multiple dice. So once again, the yellow player is defeated and placed in the prison for blue. At this point, we now remove our combat marker and those units become unlocked. Now let's go to step 6, assign hits. The striking player assigns their modified combat dice to enemy units. Troops are defeated by 1 die that equals or exceeds their health. Vehicles require 2 dice that meet or exceed both of their health values in the same strike. Extra values do not carry over, and extra dice do not carry over between strikes. On step 7, you capture or destroy defeated units. Normally, defeated units are captured and placed into the striking player's holding area. Some effects may destroy units instead, in which case they just return to their owner's reserve. But by default, defeat means capture. Step 8 is the end of the strike. If only one faction remains in the space, then combat ends immediately. Otherwise, the other player now chooses strike or flee, and the combat continues from step 3. Now, let's talk about step 3B, which is flee. Instead of striking, a player may retreat all of their units together into one adjacent space that does not contain enemy units. There is a specific sequence for this step too. So, step 1 of fleeing is choose an adjacent space with no enemy units that is also not impassable. That means no lakes, no mountains, and of course no abyss. All fleeing units must move together and they must respect space capacity. Step 2, the opponent may perform a final strike against the fleeing units. This final strike is special. It only happens against fleeing units, and the striking side rolls only their regular combat dice based on their combat attributes, plus their strike die, and then they apply the results. No modifiers other than the strike die may be used here. No faction abilities, no relic cards, no discovery cards, no other effects. Just the dice. Step 3, defeated units are captured. Any surviving units move into the destination space. And then step 4, if those fleeing units entered a devastated space with a relic token, they may pick it up. And one more very important rule. If there is no valid destination space, then those units cannot flee and they must strike instead. If they must flee but cannot, then all of those units are defeated. That is the combat system step by step, and it is one of the most important parts of Cysmic because it is how you capture units, gain leverage over opponents, and keep pressure on the board. Alright, let's talk about cyberattacks. This is a way to directly target an opponent's colony ship and steal their blueprint without ever entering combat. A cyberattack happens when an effect allows it, typically the negotiate card or the red bonus action in column 4. When you do, choose up to 3 of your unlocked units that are adjacent to an opponent's colony ship, like shown here, and now each of those units will perform a cyber attack. Each unit rolls its combat dice based on its combat stat, but not a strike die. So for example, a power mech rolls 4 red dice like this. Now instead of assigning hits to units, you are trying to match the specific value tied to that opponent's blueprint. Each blueprint has a target number shown here inside the recessed area of the construction board. If one of your dice matches that number exactly, you gain that blueprint. Now here's where this starts to feel like combat. After the dice are rolled, both players can begin modifying the dice using discovery cards, just like in combat. The attacking player can play discovery cards to modify dice, limited to 1 card per die, just like in combat. Then the defending player can respond and modify dice as well in the same way. This continues back and forth, modifying any dice on the table until the defending player passes. At that point, no more discovery cards can be played. Let's play out an example. In this particular example, we have 3 units all adjacent to this colony ship. However, 1 unit is locked in combat. So these are the only 2 units that are going to be able to cyber attack the yellow player. This unit here is going to roll a red combat die, and the miner is going to roll a yellow combat die. Now these are going to be individual attacks and we're going to resolve one at a time. The soldier is going to roll first, and they rolled a 2, and the cyber attack value for the yellow player is going to be a 4. You'll notice here in the middle, this is the cyber attack value all the way down. It is 1 through 6. So if we're trying to get the yellow blueprint, that is a 4. The blue player rolled a 2, and now they are going to add a discovery card to it. They now have a 4. The yellow player is going to now play a -1. So now it is a 3. The other player now can play a +1. The yellow player plays a -2, and unfortunately, the other player, the blue player, has no more cards to be able to bring it back to a 4. So this is a miss. These get discarded and nothing else happens there. Now the blue player is going to use this unit to roll and try to get a 4. We're going to roll, and we have a 2. In this particular case, they're going to once again play a +2. They have now a 4, which is what they need. The yellow player is going to again play a -1, and the blue player plays a +1. The yellow player has no more discovery cards, and we now actually have a 4, which is what the blue player needed. They will now obtain their blueprint, and they will flip this over to the acquired side. All right, let's talk about resources, because this is the fuel that drives almost everything in Cysmic. In this game, the actual resource types are Lorium, Discovery cards, Relic cards, Captured units, and Habitat control. A few things that are specifically not resources are blueprints, constructed modules, your own units, and espionage cards. Those cannot be traded or spent as resources can. Also, during a player's turn, resource limits are effectively unlimited, but at the end of that turn, each player has to discard back down to their legal limits. First, Lorium. Lorium is the crystal resource of the game. Each token is worth 1 Lorium. You usually gain it from miners and harvesters, and you spend it to build vehicles and colony ship modules. On your construction board, Lorium is stored from the bottom up, and when you spend it, you remove it from the top down. Your influence determines your storage limit. The first orange line above your influence cube shows your current maximum. So if your influence drops, your storage can drop too, and you may have to discard excess Lorium at the end of the turn. Next are discovery cards. Discovery cards give you 3 completely different ways to use the same card, and once you use one of those ways, that card is discarded. Option 1 is as a combat die modifier during combat or cyberattacks, as we just saw. Option 2 is as the card ability. If the card is gray, it is an action card, and you play it during the gray play a discovery card bonus action. If the card is green, it is a reaction card, and you play it immediately when its condition is met, even during another player's turn. Option 3 is for rewards. Those rewards are shown by the icons along the bottom of the card, and you also take those during your gray play a discovery card bonus action. So when you look at a discovery card, the anatomy is pretty simple. The main text area gives you the die modifier or ability text. The color tells you whether it's an action or reaction if you're using the ability. And the icons along the bottom show the reward option. And the game mode icons show which modes that card can be used in. Those bottom reward icons matter, so let's call them out. Some rewards give you habitat control, meaning you take control of a neutral or enemy habitat of the value shown. Some give you bonus actions in any command column matching the printed icon. Some deploy units for free to one or more of your deploy locations. Some give you items, meaning Lorium, relic cards, or even more discovery cards. And the card may say and or, meaning you take both rewards or choose one side. Also, players can only hold up to 5 discovery cards at the end of their turn. Now, let's look at planetary events. These are special types of discovery cards used only in competitive mode. There are 12 of them, and if you include them, they get shuffled into the discovery deck during setup. When you gain a discovery card and you draw a planetary event instead, you reveal it immediately, resolve it immediately, and then discard it. Then draw a replacement discovery card, so they never should be in your hand. Next, relic cards. Relic cards are different from discovery cards because they are persistent. They stay active and they keep affecting your faction. When you gain a relic, you do not just draw one. You always draw 2, keep one, and discard the other. That happens when you pick up a relic token or when another effect tells you to gain a relic card. To activate a relic, place it in one of the relic slots on the right side of your construction board. You can do that at any time during your turn, and if you gain a relic during another player's turn, you can activate it immediately then too. If both slots are full, you can discard one active relic to make room for the new one. Relics in your hand are considered inactive. At the end of your turn, you can have at most 5 total relics, but only 2 of them can be active. The anatomy of a relic card is also very straightforward. It shows the game mode icons, the relic type, the relic name, the ability icons, and then the relic ability text itself. Now, captured units are enemy units you have defeated in combat or gained from effects. They go into the holding cells on the left side of your construction board, and you have 6 holding cells total. Each one can hold either 2 troops or 1 vehicle. And as you construct colony ship modules, the holding cells next to those modules permanently close. So your captured unit capacity actually shrinks as your ship gets built. Captured units are one of the most important resources in the game because they can be traded back to their owner for blueprints. The exchange rate is 2 troops or 1 vehicle for that faction's blueprint, and those traded units go back to the owner's reserve. Rescued units also go back to their owner's reserve, and stolen units get transferred to the new captor's holding area. If you ever have more captured units than your closed or open cells allow, you resolve that overflow at the end of the turn by returning surplus units to their owner's reserve. And finally, habitat control. This is important because influence itself is not a spendable resource. Influence is a live value that tracks your support and determines recruitment power and lorium storage, but it is never spent like currency. Habitat control itself is the resource. Each habitat you control counts as 1 resource regardless of whether it is worth 1, 2, 3, or 5 influence. That control can only be traded or spent if an action or effect specifically allows resource trading or spending. If habitat control changes hands, you update the control flags and adjust influence immediately. And if losing that habitat lowers your influence enough, it can actually reduce your lorium storage capacity immediately. So the short version is this. Lorium is your build resource. Discovery cards are flexible one-time tools with 3 different uses. Planetary events are instant global discovery cards. Relics are ongoing powers you slot into your board. Captured units are leverage for blueprints. And habitat control is a tradable resource, while influence is the live stat that rises and falls with it. Now let's talk about the Espionage Expansion. This is an optional deck for the competitive mode, but it adds a lot of depth and player interaction without introducing entirely new core mechanics. It also works alongside Molten Core and Planetary Events mini-expansions. It does not, however, work with Euro mode, solo mode, or co-op. Players usually gain espionage cards through the Espionage Negotiate card or certain bonus actions. When you gain one, you draw the top card of the Espionage deck and you read both options out loud. Each Espionage card has 2 options: Sabotage, which affects all opponents negatively, and Exploit, which benefits only you. And each option is one of 2 types. Some say immediately, then discard. Those resolve right away and go straight to the discard pile. Others say while this option is in play. Those stay active as ongoing effects until they are replaced or discarded. If the chosen option stays in play, you slide the card onto your command board so that only the chosen half is visible. If you chose Sabotage, that side faces your opponents, since it affects them. If you chose Exploit, that side faces you, since it affects only you. There are also activation limits. In a 2 or 3 player game, only 1 espionage card may be active across the entire table. In a 4 or 5 player game, the limit is 2. In a 6 player game, the limit is 3. And no matter the player count, each player may only have 1 active espionage card of their own at one time. So whenever you gain an espionage card, first check capacity. If you already have 1 active, you must discard your current one first. If you do not have 1 active, but the table-wide limit has already been reached, you choose any espionage card currently in play and discard it from its owner. Then you draw your new card, choose 1 option, and either resolve and discard it immediately or slide it under your command board if it stays in play. So the short version is this: draw the card, read both options, choose one. If it says immediately, resolve it and discard it. And if it says while this option is in play, just tuck it under your command board with the chosen side showing. That's the full espionage system. All right, now let's look at the construction board, because this is where you track the core state of your faction. This board manages 5 major things: your influence, your lorium storage, your active relics, your captured enemy units, and your blueprints. First, the influence track. Your influence cube starts at the value shown on your faction card. Influence is not a currency, you never spend it and you never save it. It only goes up or down when you gain or lose control of habitats. And that value controls two things: how much Laurium you can store and how strong your recruitment power is. Higher influence means better storage and better recruiting. Next is the Laurium track. When you gain Laurium, place it from the bottommost empty space upward like shown here. Your current storage limit is based on your influence. Specifically, it is the first orange line above your influence cube. If your influence reaches 21 or higher, your Laurium storage becomes unlimited. If your influence drops and your storage limit drops with it, you do not discard immediately. You discard surplus Laurium at the end of that turn. Next are the relic slots on the right side. To activate a relic, place it face up into an open slot. If both slots are full, you can activate a new relic by discarding one of your currently active relics and replacing it. So this is where your two active relics live. Now on the left side are your captured unit holding cells. Each blueprint slot also functions as a holding cell until that module gets constructed. Each holding cell can hold either 2 troops, one in each space, or 1 vehicle, which takes both spaces. You can rearrange your captured units between open holding cells at any time, and any enemy color can go into any open holding cell. Finally, your blueprint tokens. At the start of the game, all 6 blueprint tokens are in their matching slots. Some will already show acquired and others will show missing. You need all 6 blueprints before you can fully construct your colony ship. And you can gain the missing ones in any order. There are 2 main ways to gain a blueprint. First, by returning captured units to their owner. 2 troops or 1 vehicle from that faction gets you that faction's blueprint. And that exchange cannot be refused. Second, through Cyberattack, by matching the Cyberattack target value shown in that blueprint slot. When you gain a blueprint, flip that token to its acquired side. That means you now know how to build that module. So this whole board is really your faction dashboard. It shows your political support, your resource storage, your active relic powers, your prisoner capacity, and your ship progress, all in one place. Now let's continue with the construction board and focus on how you actually build your colony ship. Each of these 6 blueprint slots corresponds to a colony ship module. Once you've acquired a blueprint, you can construct that module. To build a module, you must spend Laurium and possibly recall troops back to your reserve. When you construct it, you slide the corresponding blueprint to the left side and place the module on your colony ship miniature. Now here's the important part. When you construct a module, the holding cell attached to that slot permanently closes. So as you build your ship, your ability to hold captured units gets smaller. Now, modules can be built in one of 2 ways. First is the standard method using robotic construction on your colony ship command card. This is the most efficient way because you can build as many modules as you can afford all at once. Second is the manual construct using your gray bonus action. To do that, you spend the required Laurium and you recall units from the board back to your reserve equal to the amount of influence needed to build that module, like shown here. So even if your command cards don't necessarily line up, you always have a way to keep building on every turn. Now once all 6 modules are constructed, your colony ship is complete, and that's when you're ready to move toward launching. So at a high level, blueprints unlock modules, Laurium, troops, and actions get them built, and every module you complete moves you closer to escaping the planet, while tightening your captured unit capacity along the way. Let's talk about launching your colony ship, because this is how you win the game. At the end of your turn, you may attempt to launch if 2 conditions are met. Your colony ship must have all 6 modules constructed, and your colony ship must not be on a devastated space. Now before you launch, you'll usually need to evacuate your units. The colony ship command card includes an evacuate action. In fact, that's the only place it is, and you can only perform it once your colony ship is complete. When you evacuate, you move each of your unlocked units one at a time toward your colony ship using their normal movement rules. When a unit enters the colony ship space, return it to your reserve as if it has boarded the ship. And this is very important. Units do not just get onto the ship automatically through normal movement. They must be evacuated. Also, locked units cannot be evacuated because they are not free to move. And units captured by opponents cannot be evacuated either. Those have to be returned or rescued first. So let's get to the actual launch. If all of your troops and vehicles are already in your reserve, your launch succeeds automatically. You win immediately. If any of your units are still stranded, either on the planet or captured by opponents, you may still attempt to launch by rolling the humanity die. Here's how that works. First, count how many of your troops and vehicles are not in your reserve. That includes units still on the planet and units still captured. Then roll the humanity die, which is a 6-sided die. If your roll is equal to or higher than the number of stranded units, you launch successfully. If your roll is lower, you cannot bring yourself to leave them behind. You do not launch this turn, and you can try again at the end of a later turn. The moment a player successfully launches, the game ends immediately. And finally, Echoes of Humanity. This is an optional legacy-style rule, and if the player launches while leaving units behind, you record that on the Echoes of Humanity score sheet. Who the player was, the date, the faction they played, and the quantity and type of units abandoned. In that player's next game, those listed units are removed from the reserve during setup and returned to the box for that game only. After that game, win or lose, the penalty is considered paid, and their full starting units return in future sessions. So the short version is this: complete all 6 modules, make sure your ship is not on a devastated space, and evacuate as many units as you can. If everyone is safely in reserve, you win automatically. If not, roll the humanity die to see whether you can leave the rest behind. This is the finish line of Cysmic. Alright, now that you understand the systems of Cysmic, let's walk through the full structure of a turn. The game is organized in 3 layers. A turn is one player's actions, a round is when every player has taken 1 turn, and a cycle is 5 rounds, because there are 5 command columns on your command board. At the start of each cycle, the player holding the first player marker becomes the first player. Then each round, players take turns in clockwise order, starting with that player. Now on your turn, you perform these 7 steps in order. Step 1 is you can reclaim a command card. This step is optional. At the start of your turn, you may discard one of your active or inactive relic cards to return one of your burned or played command cards to your hand. That reclaimed card can be used this turn or saved for later. You can only discard 1 relic for this step, and if you already have all 10 command cards in your hand, you skip this step. Step 2 is you burn a command card. You choose 1 card from your hand and place it face down in the current command column. It has no effect, you're not resolving it. Your opponents cannot look at your burned cards, but you may look at your own at any time. Step 3 is you play a command card. Now choose 1 card from your hand and place it face up on top of the card you just burned. Both cards always go in the same column. Then step 4 is you perform the command card actions. Now resolve your played card from top to bottom, 1 section at a time. If it is a tactic command card, you may perform 1 action from each section once each. If it is a unit command card, each of your unlocked units of that type may perform 1 action from each section. If a section has 1 action, each unit may do that action. If a section has 2 actions, each unit chooses one of those 2 actions for itself. Units may perform in any order, and any unit may skip a section entirely. If an action has a trimmer icon, each unit performing that action triggers its own separate trimmer. This is also a good place to remind players what the cards are really for. Your tactic cards are Recruit, Upgrade, Battle, and Negotiate. Your unit cards are Soldiers, Miners, Speakers, Power Mechs, Harvesters, and Colony Ship. So your tactics handle the broader engineering and political moves, while your unit cards directly command pieces on the planet. Step 5, perform a bonus action. After resolving your card, perform one bonus action from the current column that matches one of the bonus action icons on your played command card. Step 6 is launch. Now this step is optional and it only matters if your colony ship is complete. If all of your units have been evacuated to your reserve, you launch successfully and you win immediately. If any of your units are still on the planet or captured, you may roll the humanity die to attempt the launch anyway. A successful roll launches your ship and ends the game. A failed roll means the game continues. Which means then we move on to step 7. All players discard surplus resources. At the end of your turn, every player checks their limits and discards down if needed. That means reducing Lorium down to the current storage capacity, reducing Discovery cards down to 5, reducing Relic cards down to 5 total, including up to 2 active, and reducing captured units down to the current holding capacity. Then your turn ends, and play passes clockwise to the next player. Once every player has taken one turn, the round ends. Then everyone moves on to the next command column and begins a new round. After 5 rounds, all 5 columns have been used and the cycle ends. This is when you perform a reset. A reset is the only action that happens outside of a player's turn. During reset, each player returns all of their burned and played command cards to their hand. That gives everyone their full command hand back and starts the next cycle fresh. And this is also when the first player marker matters. The player holding the first player marker is the one who starts each cycle as the first player. So while turn order stays clockwise within a round, that marker decides who leads the next cycle. So the full flow of the game looks like this. On your turn, you may reclaim a card, then burn one, play one, resolve it, take a bonus action, attempt a launch, and then everybody discards surplus resources. After everyone has taken a turn, the round ends, and after 5 rounds, the cycle ends. All command cards return to your hand, and a new cycle begins with the first player. That's the full turn structure of Cysmic, and once you understand that rhythm, the rest of the game starts to feel much more natural. And we've come to the end of our comprehensive how to play video tutorial for Cysmic. Without a rulebook, this video will completely give you every rule that you need to know to start a game right away. I know this has been a lot of information, but again, this video is meant to completely replace the rulebook so that you can get started right away. So, my name is Jason Blake. I wish you well on your first experience into Cysmic, and please share with me on BGG and other places online what that first experience is like. My name again is Jason Blake. Thank you so much for your support, and of course, thanks for watching.